Good morning. It is now 9:34 local time in Vermont, 8:34 in Texas, and this is the duly noticed and called meeting of the Texas Low-Level Radioactive Waste Disposal Compact Commission. Today is October 10th, 2019. We are here in lovely Montpelier, Vermont, and we are very happy to be here and appreciate all the hospitality that the state of Vermont and our Vermont Commissioner Dick Saudick has shown us. We appreciate the weather more than anything. But we will now call our meeting to order, and we will have a determination of quorum. I see Vice Chairman Solzman, the judge, Commissioner Saudick, and Commissioner Morris, and we're joined on the dais today, as always, by our Attorney General Representative Dave Gordon, who we appreciate. We appreciate all of you making the trip to Vermont. We have a couple of special guests that we want to introduce. We are very proud today to have a commissioner from our own TCEQ in Texas, Bobby Janecka, who has recently been appointed, who we all know and have worked with for years, so we are very happy and proud of Bobby's accomplishments. We also have Amy from the TCEQ, who is one of their in-house lawyers. We appreciate her being here. We appreciate all the rest of you being here as well. We hope to have some visitors from Vermont government come in, and we will introduce those as they come in. But do we have, beyond our elected officials, do we have any press with us here today? I did not say this before we started the meeting, but there are sign-up sheets here at the front table and also some speaker sheets if anyone would like to speak on any topic as we go through the agenda. With the number of people that we have here today, if you want to speak, we probably will not enforce the rules too stringently, so please just raise your hand. But on that, we are to item 4 on our agenda, which is a public comment period. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission with some general public comments before we get to the specific items on our agenda? Okay. We will then move on to the substance.
I'd like to note the great win of the Washington Nationals last night on a grand slam home run.
I second that motion.
First time they've gone to the second round of, or I guess the third round of the playoffs.
I'll second that motion if you'll pray for the Astros.
Let's say I'm sure all the Red Sox fans appreciate your comment.
They didn't even make it.
I know. We can move on now to item 5 on our agenda, which is consideration and possible action on applications for the importation of low-level radioactive waste. Our first one is item 5A on the agenda, which is the import application of Next Era Energy Point Beach. And commissioners, on your electronic agenda, that is tab 9. And for those of you using a written notebook, it is also tab 9. And with that, I will turn it over to our chairman of our technical committee and vice chairman, John Salzman.
Mr. Chairman, the technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Next Era Energy Point Beach LLC. We'll refer to them as Point Beach from here on out. That was received August 19, 2019. It's number 1-0236-00. In this case, they are a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They specifically requested authorization for Class B and Class C unstable resins, and that waste stream was approved by TCEQ in letter correspondence dated September 20, 2019. They've requested a volume of 125.2 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 300 curies. The waste will originate from the state of Wisconsin, which is in the Midwest Compact and does not require export authorization. And I would note that they've requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2020. And I think that's it. The technical committee would recommend approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
John, do they qualify as a small quantity generator?
No.
Also, the volume to curie ratio, considering it's B and C waste, is that a rather small amount of curies, isn't it?
It is. It could be particularly because a particular isotope might be in there that's driving it into the Class B, C category.
Any other questions for the technical committee? Hearing none, we'll move on to a motion then.
I make a motion that we approve the import application from NextEra Energy, Point Beach. That's number 1-0236-00. The waste class is Class B and Class C. The waste form is unstable, and the waste description is resins. It's for 125.2 cubic feet and 300 curies, and the agreement would terminate August 31 of 2020.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about the import application of NextEra Energy Point Beach, represented by item 5A on the agenda? Any public comment on item 5A? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of NextEra Energy Point Beach, represented in item 5A of the agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Please note, for purposes of quorum, that the chair was voting in the affirmative on that as well. And by the way, commissioners, I will remind you that we have the skinniest of quorums, so everything will have to be unanimous today if we want to pass it. Let me note for anyone watching on video or maybe out in the audience, if you see us looking down at our devices and computers, it's because we now do all our notebooks electronically, so we're not surfing the internet. We're actually looking at the documents that we're supposed to be looking at.
We promise.
Yeah. With that, we'll move on to item 5B, which is the import application of Indiana-Michigan Power. Mr. Vice Chairman.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Indiana-Michigan Power DC Cook Plant. That was received August 28, 2019, and it's number 1-0237-00. In this case, DC Cook is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They've specifically requested authorization for Class A, Class B, and Class C, stable and unstable, resin media, charcoal media, dry active waste, mechanical filters, and metal, and those waste streams were approved in letter correspondence from TCEQ dated September 20, 2019. DC Cook has specifically requested a volume of 1,000 cubic feet and 250 curies. That waste will originate in Michigan, which is an unaffiliated state. And they have requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2020. The technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Before we do that, we had a guest join us, and I want to give Commissioner Sadek the opportunity to introduce him.
Come on up. This is Tim Ash. Tim is the President Pro Tem of the Senate, and that makes him an extraordinarily powerful man in this area. He shaking his head, but that's just modesty. But Tim has been a leading legislator on matters having to do with energy for a number of years, and he's chaired the committee that is involved with that, and he's also now, as I say, a leader of the Democrats, and for that matter, the entire legislature, in particular the Senate. I asked him if Tim would be willing to come over and say a few words, and welcome, and here he is.
Well, thank you. And yeah, in Vermont we do things a little different. So I am the elected leader of the Senate by both parties. And if you attended a single committee meeting, you would not know which party the members of the Senate are from, in part because we do try to, it's not fake bipartisanship.
What about consensus? Building got put here, right?
Well, I find consensus a sort of strange concept in politics, but I do believe in fairly hearing people out. But I want to apologize to my mother for appearing in front of a committee like this, unshaven and wild-haired. She would be disappointed. So I just wanted to say a couple quick words. First of all, welcome to Vermont. I think you've all been here before, and you've picked a perfect time of year to be here. Sunglasses reflect that it is sunny outside of Montpelier, so if you get a chance to get out, you'll enjoy enjoy the scenery. And I'll just say a quick word, because over the years that this commission has been in operation, Vermont's energy policy has, I feel like Vermont's energy policy has been very forward-looking in general. Our efficiency programs have been leading national programs. Our cultural buy-in to efficiency and strong regulation of our utilities and getting them to be active participants in a different way of producing energy and distributing, I think has all been a big success story. And now we're in this sort of mind-blowing moment. And I've tried to relate this to people who, for whom fighting climate change is a primary concern and something that is a passion, that we went for a period of almost 30 years convincing people that the solution to our energy and environmental future was to reduce the consumption of electricity. And we've developed an entire utility apparatus which is focused on that and to clean up that electric generation. And now we're saying, in fact, when replacing fossil fuels, we may want to increase the consumption of electricity. And we're going through some growing pains as we figure out how to make that pivot to continue to care about the most efficient consumption of electricity, to produce as much clean electricity as possible, but now facing all sorts of growing pains as we think about transportation and building heating from an electricity point of view. And a couple just quick examples of those growing pains. Year after year, when solar was starting to proliferate around Vermont and really heating up in the late first decade of 2000s and then the last decade, the legislature on an annual basis would write laws telling the utilities how much solar they were allowed to produce so that it would phase in and not inappropriately disadvantage ratepayers. And each year it was sort of frustrating because we would be told that we were setting the law for maybe 5 years at a time, but the solar was happening so quickly that they'd be back the next year. So then the industry came to us and said, you know, let's have the regulators set up an ongoing process so we don't have to go through the legislature anymore. And we in some way said, oh, you know, this is great. Less technical work, let the regulators and the utilities and others come together and solve these problems. Well, no sooner did we do that than the industry didn't like what the regulators proposed as a path forward. And so there's an example of some of the struggles we're having. Right now, our regulators are looking at the issue of special rate structures for people who are charging electric vehicles and anticipating the deployment of far more in the future. I have not yet heard anyone express this concern, but I have a strong feeling that just like solar presented a challenge in terms of how much subsidy was required to get people to deploy it, we're going to face the exact same challenges when it comes to electric charging infrastructure, because the batteries are going to become superior, the vehicles are going to become lighter, and we're going to constantly be challenged to make sure that we're not providing unintended over-subsidization of those who are charging, depending on the policy. So we really find ourselves in a very important time, and one of our challenges as a legislature, and we have essentially no staff. I don't quite know how it works in Texas, but we have like I have one person who works for me. That's it. There's no one else who works directly for a legislator. We share a nonpartisan team. But we're having a heck of a time communicating to the public that our environmental efforts as it relates to energy, and with all the activism around addressing climate change, climate concerns, that transportation and heating are our two biggest problem areas. The focus has been so much on solar and wind that many in the public continue to believe that those are our primary contributors here in Vermont to harmful emissions. And transportation and heating now dwarf our electric sector, partially because we've done such a good job on the electric sector. But the behavior change that's required for heating and transportation to become cleaner, more efficient, is much harder, whether it's Vermont or Texas, than it is to get people to put solar panels on a roof. And just as one small example, our public transit system has reduced ridership in the last couple of years while we have more focus on the importance of doing something to protect our planet. And try as we might, many people continue to believe that the slightly more efficient vehicle will solve all those problems, and public transit continues to be this struggle. So one of our jobs is to constantly be juggling appropriate public policies that will actually connect to behavior change, hopefully voluntary, and that has been a real, I've been learning a lot as we go through that process. So anyways, I thank you for the work you're doing. I'm glad you guys come up here for one of your visits, and I want to thank Dick for inviting me to say hello and welcome. And if you ever want to come staff one of our committees, just say the word. We'd be glad to have you come.
On behalf of the commission, we appreciate your attendance. We usually don't get anyone nearly of your level of importance to our meetings. So we want to also tell you that you've got wonderful commissioners from Vermont that we value their input on every single thing we do. We bore them with our Texas problems all the time, but they're always willing to chip in, and they are an active and very important part of our commission. And we view our commission as very much a two-state partnership, that Vermont's an equal and important partner, that although it just says Texas in the name, we have, internally, we often refer to it as the Texas-Vermont Commission. So, but we appreciate the opportunity to be here, and we appreciate your attendance, so thank you very much.
Yeah, and I just say that I think the fact that most Vermonters don't frequently hear about the work you do is a sign of the positive collaboration between the states, and that sometimes no news is a sign of a success story. And I have been, I've traveled pretty decently through Texas, and despite the perceived differences between the states, there's a lot of similarity.
We have found a lot of similarity.
A lot of similarity, and anyway, so I applaud you guys for the work you do, and thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Tim, I might just point out, you know, where Vermont Yankee will ultimately reside is this place that we concern ourselves with, and that Dave Carlson is right there. He's the head of it. He's the head of the WCS, Waste Control Specialists, and they're the ones who run that facility. And over here, Bobby Janeka is, he's on the, he's a recent member of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and they oversee the environmental end and just to a great degree the financial end of disposing of these plants. So as I say, our beloved nuke is going to wind up in under the ground out there, right, with these two guys.
What community, what town is it in?
Andrews County and Andrews the city. They're both named
Andrews City.
Kind of in the general area of Midland in the Permian Basin, actually.
Okay.
You're invited anytime you want to come out.
Well, I might take you up on it. West Texas in particular, I find completely beautiful.
Yes.
I found myself in, all right, Vermont members, you ever heard of the Marfa Lights?
Everyone from Texas laughed, so obviously.
Yes. So Marfa Lights, I happened to be on occasion to see them, which was pretty wild. And that whole area of the country is, it's mysterious to many people from the Northeast, but once you get there, you realize it's actually quite beautiful. And we went to Big Bend National Park, which of course is, I think, the least visited national park because it takes sort of like 100 years to get there. But once you're there, it's sort of, you've got it all to yourself and the heat. Anyways, thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Now, back to item 5B on our agenda. We were to the point where the technical committee was going to answer any questions.
Recommended approval and happy to answer questions.
Any questions on item 5B, the import application of Indiana, Michigan Power DC Cook? Hearing none, I guess we can move on to a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the import application from Indiana, Michigan Power DC Cook Plant. It's number 1-0237-00. The waste class is Class A, Class B, and Class C. The waste form is stable and unstable. The waste description is resin mediate I need a drink of water. Resin media, charcoal media, dry active waste, mechanical filters, and metal. The volume is 1,000 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 250 curies. The waste will originate from Michigan, and in this case, the agreement will terminate August 31 of 2020.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the import application represented in item 5B on our agenda from Indiana Michigan Power Plant, DC Cook? Any public comment on item 5B? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Indiana Michigan Power DC Cook Plant, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Please note for the record that the chairman was voting in the affirmative too, so the ayes have it and the motion passes. We can now move on to item 5C, which is tab 10, both in your PDF and in your notebook, which is the import application of Southern Nuclear Operating Company, the Farley Nuclear Plant. Mr. Vice Chairman.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Southern Nuclear Operating Company, Farley Nuclear Plant, that was received August 30, 2019. It's number 1-0238-00. And in this case, Farley is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have specifically requested authorization for Class B and Class C stable and unstable bead resin and process filters, and those waste streams were approved by TCEQ and letter correspondence dated September 20, 2019. They've requested a volume of 400 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 500 curies. The waste will originate from the state of Alabama, which is located in the Southeast Compact and does not require export authorization. And they have requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2020. The Tech Committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the Vice Chairman on item 5C? Hearing none, we'll move on to a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the import application from Southern Nuclear Operating Company, Farley Nuclear Plant, number 1-0238-00. The waste class is Class B and Class C. The waste form is stable and unstable. The waste stream is bead resin and process filters. The volume is 400 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 500 curies. The waste will originate from Alabama, and the agreement would terminate August 31, 2020.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about the import application of Southern Nuclear Operating Company, Farley Nuclear Plant? Any public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Southern Nuclear Operating Company, Farley Nuclear Plant, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Please reflect that the chair also voted in the affirmative, and with that, the motion passes. We can now move on to item 5D, which is the import application of Qualtech. Mr. Vice Chairman.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an import application from Qualtech Associates that was received August 30, 2019, and it's number 1-0239-00. In this case, Qualtech is a broker who's a licensed waste processor and collector requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have requested authorization for Class A and Class C stable, sealed sources, and depleted uranium shielding, and those waste streams were approved by TCQ and letter correspondence dated September 20, 2019. They've requested a volume of 55 cubic feet and a total radioactivity of 120 curies. In this case, the waste will originate from the Southeast, Southwestern, Midwest, Central, Midwest, Appalachian, and Atlantic compacts, and the unaffiliated states of Nebraska, Michigan, New York, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C. Of that list, the Southwestern Compact does require export authorization, and we will still need to receive the export authorization and supplemental generator authorizations for those wastes before they make shipments. And I would note that we just received some export permits from the Southwestern Compact, but I have not looked at those compared to this.
And it may be in there, yes.
It may be in that package. They have requested an agreement that would actually terminate December 2019. So based on that, their intention is they want to ship very quickly. In this case, they've also requested that the waste be considered under a small quantity generator set aside. And even though they've included utility, it appears that the waste is not from a nuclear utility. It's coming from a regular coal-fired or gas-fired plant or something like that. So that would not preclude it. And so my recommendation would be that the waste would be totaled against a small quantity generator set aside. And with that, the technical committee recommends approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
John, when it's a broker like this, do we look through the broker to the individual generators to determine if it's small quantity generator?
We do that because we get the actual generator authorization, so we know who specifically is sending the waste to Qualtech in this case. So we go back and can actually physically look at those to confirm, in fact, that Farley or some nuclear power plant isn't trying to use this entity to dispose of their waste.
Have we ever had the instance where some of the generators that are using the broker for the individual applications, some qualify and some do not?
Actually, we have had some brokers that were handling waste for nuclear power plants, and in which case we said, no, that waste doesn't qualify. The only other sort of unusual condition we had, it was a number of years ago, and there were a bunch of small generators that were using a broker. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but there was some question about where some of that waste originated. The waste was, they had had it so long, it was so old that they didn't have good records. And there were some of those wastes that we declined to allow the broker to handle, or to dispose of it in Texas anyway. I don't know how the broker handled it, but they did not dispose of that waste in Texas. Because the paperwork trail was
It died somewhere.
concerning.
Any other questions for the technical committee on this?
I'm just struck by the fact that this is Class A and Class C. And usually when you have that long bunch of sources.
I suspect if you notice, the waste stream included depleted uranium shielding, and it's quite likely that that depleted uranium will be the Class A waste, and the sources will end up being the Class C. The depleted uranium has a very low specific activity, so lots of volume, very little activity, and it's very heavy. That's probably the Class A waste stream here.
My other question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just, because, usually they'll say A, B, and C, and they kind of, but I take it they've been.
In this case, it probably would have been C only, except for the depleted uranium shielding.
The other question I had is the expiration date that they're asking for is just a little over 2 months away.
They want to make a shipment right away. As I recall, they had talked about amending, they already have an agreement with us, and they had talked about amending their agreement to include this. The problem was it didn't qualify as a small, or a minor amendment, because they were changing waste stream and they were needing to add, I think, curies and volume perhaps, and so it didn't qualify as a minor amendment, so they decided it's just easier to put in a new application.
Okay. And obviously that's their business to decide if they want to end it before.
Sure.
My only thought was, knowing that there's uncertainties out there, if for some reason this shipment.
Then they'd have to come back to us and amend the date of expiration, which probably would be
A minor amendment?
a minor amendment.
Okay. Any further questions for the technical committee? Hearing none, I think we can move on to a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the import application from Qualtech Associates. It's number 1-0239-00. In this case, the waste class is Class A and Class C. The waste form is stable. The waste stream is sealed sources and depleted uranium shielding. The volume is 55 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 120 curies. It will originate from the southeast, southwestern, Midwest, central Midwest, Appalachian, and Atlantic compacts, and the unaffiliated states of Nebraska, Michigan, New York, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C. They will need to provide the Commission export authorizations if they have not already done so, as well as generator authorizations. Actually, I'm noting in here that it looks like they may have already provided the generator authorizations, and I'll go back and review that. So if they haven't already provided them, they will need to provide them. In this case, the agreement would terminate December 20, 2019, and it would be considered under a small quantity generator set aside.
There's a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 5D on our agenda, the import application of Qualtech? Any public comment on item 5D? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Qualtech Associates in item 5D on our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Please show the chair also voting in the affirmative, and with that, the motion passes. We are now on to item 5E, the import application of Southern Nuclear. I'm sorry, it's a different plant, but the second import application from Southern Nuclear, and with that, we'll turn it back over to the Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, the Technical Committee has received and reviewed an import application from Southern Nuclear Company, Vogel. That was received August 30, 2019. It's number 1-0240-00. In this case, Vogel is a generator requesting authorization to dispose of waste in accordance with the Act. They have requested authorization for Class B and Class C unstable resin and cartridge filters, and those waste streams were approved for disposal by TCEQ. Letter correspondence dated September 20, 2019. They've requested authorization for 300 cubic feet and 200 curies. In this case, the waste will originate from Georgia, which is part of the Southeast Compact and does not require export authorization. And they've requested an agreement that would terminate August 31, 2020. The Technical Committee recommends approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the Technical Committee on item 5E on our agenda? Hearing none, we can move on to a motion.
Make a motion we approve the import application from Southern Nuclear Company. It's number 1-0240-00. The waste class is Class B and Class C. The waste form is unstable. The waste stream is resin and cartridge filters. The volume is 300 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 200 curies. The waste will originate from Georgia, and the agreement would terminate August 31, 2020.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on item 5E on the agenda? Any public comment on item 5E? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the import application of Southern Nuclear Company Vogel, represented in item 5E on our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Please show the chair also voting aye, and with that, the motion passes. With that, we have concluded item 5 on our agenda. We will now move on to item 6, which starts at tab 14 in the notebooks in the PDF, for the consideration and possible action on applications for export authorizations. The first one is item 6A, which is the export request of Cardinal Health NPS. And with that, we'll turn it back over to the Vice Chairman.
The Technical Committee has received and reviewed an export application from Cardinal Health NPS. In this case, they're an industrial generator requesting export authorization through August 31 of 2020. They're requesting authorization for 30 cubic feet, 1 curie of radioactivity. It's Class A. Their intention is to send the material to the Energy Solutions facility in Oak Ridge. The waste description is PPE and syringe vials with biological material and/or greater than 1% liquids by volume. So obviously any waste with liquids or biological material are not directly disposable at the site without additional treatment because of the license conditions at the site. And the technical committee would recommend approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Didn't we approve an export petition at our last meeting for Cardinal Health as well? I just wondered why they were back so soon. If there was, I thought when we did our exports before, Cardinal was
I don't
one of the-
recall that we did one, but I could be wrong, Brandon. I'm not.
Okay. Any further questions for the technical committee?
I don't understand this explanation, justification for exportation. They're not able to reasonably comply with the compact facility treatment, processing, and packaging requirements. Is this an economic problem, or is this a technical problem? Is this something?
Well, it's actually, it's probably both, Dick. Economically, it's easier to send the entire waste stream to a facility, and they'll basically incinerate it, and then there'll be from a volume of whatever it is, whatever they've stated, once you incinerate that waste, basically all that'll be left is ash. So you'll go from actually a relatively large volume to a very small volume. The technical issue is, in its current form, it's not acceptable at WCS because it has biological material which you have to treat specially to comply with the license, or it has greater than 1% liquids, which are not directly receivable, again, without some kind of treatment because of license conditions.
I think it's a health and safety issue also.
So it would be more expensive to try to comply with the license conditions at WCS than it would be to send the waste for incineration and then disposal of the small amount of ash that would result. But Dave,
How about say?
if you would wish to speak on this issue.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear.
Sure. So the PPE shouldn't be a problem. Vials, certainly we have dealt with biologics in the past, but it's a different process. They most certainly prefer the incineration process. I don't know if it's more expensive or cheaper than what we would do. We do provide an alternative for that, but this is a very small quantity. It's 30 cubic feet. It's not a large revenue amount.
It's probably about four 55-gallon drums of waste.
Right, so we would be fairly indifferent to this if they feel like their biologics are better treated through incineration, and it's this kind of low volume. Certainly we could find a way to do it if that's what they preferred. In this case, it really doesn't make a significant difference to us.
And I think everyone knows this, but just to confirm, obviously the Andrews County facility does not provide an incineration option.
No, it does not, but we have other methods of treating biologic materials or of absorbing liquids to prepare them for disposal.
So if this shipment was a larger volume, your opinion may be different on, or your position on export might be different?
Yes, it could be, and as the Commissioner mentioned, when you have to do a lot of handling of something that has syringes and so on, it does make it more difficult to deal with. We've talked about carcasses before, and carcasses have their own, special considerations that, many people would prefer to use incineration, although we've disposed of carcasses in the past.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlson before we let him go?
So you don't have a problem with exporting in this situation?
No, sir, I don't.
Yeah.
Thank you. we done our motion on this yet?
No.
So I think it's time we move on to a motion then on item 6A.
I make a motion that we approve the export request from Cardinal Health NPS. They're an industrial generator. The volume is 30 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 1 curie. The waste class is Class A. The waste will be sent to Energy Solutions in Bear Creek. And the authorization would be from now through August 31 of 2020.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion about item 6A, the export request of Cardinal Health? And just so to remind everyone, for the benefit of the lawyers in the room, when we approve export, it is a authorization to export, unlike our imports, which actually lead to contracts. So this is, when we refer to it as an export authorization, that's the reason we don't use the term agreement. Any other discussion about item 6A? Any public comment on 6A? Hearing none, we can move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the export authorization of Cardinal Health NPS represented in item 6A in our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Please show that the chairman's voting in the affirmative as well. And with that, the motion passes. And we can move on to item 6B, which is the export authorization request of Bionomics. Mr. Vice Chairman.
The technical committee has received and reviewed an export request from Bionomics Incorporated. In this case, they are applying as a broker on behalf of Texas A&M University, which is an academic research facility. They've requested an authorization that through August 31 of 2020. In this case, they're requesting a volume of 7 cubic feet, so it's probably about 1 55-gallon drum. And the total radioactivity is 0.01 curies. It is Class A waste. They again would be sending the material to Energy Solutions facility for incineration in Tennessee. The waste description in this case is liquid scintillation vials, animal carcasses, and small aqueous liquid vials for basically the same kinds of reasons as we've just discussed. Their preference is to incinerate the stream versus trying to treat it otherwise. The technical committee would recommend approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the technical committee on the export authorization request of Bionomics? Hearing none, we'll move on to a motion.
I make a motion we approve the export request from Bionomics Incorporated as a broker on behalf of Texas A&M University. The agreement, the export authorization would be through August 31 of 2020. The volume is 7 cubic feet. The total radioactivity is 0.01 curies. Waste class is Class A. The facility will be going to Energy Solutions in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And the waste stream is liquid scintillation vials, animal carcasses, and small aqueous liquid vials.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion on item 6B, the export request of Bionomics? Any public comment on item 6B? Mr. Carlson, do you have the same position on this one that you did on the Cardinal Health? Okay. Any other public comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the export authorization request from Bionomics represented in item 6B on our agenda, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Please show the chair as voting in the affirmative, and with that, the motion passes. And that concludes our import and export requests. We're now on to item 7 in the agenda, and we are very appreciative of Mike Pletcher being with us here today from North Star to give us an update on the Vermont Yankee decommissioning. So, Mr. Pletcher.
I'm going to go over to here and start my presentation.
And for anyone who, we are going to ask Mr. Pletcher to send us his PowerPoint, and we will then post it on our website. That way everyone can have access to it.
That's true. He downloaded it to the judge's computer.
There you go. So North Star Vermont Yankee, my name is Michael Pletcher. I'm the Radiation Protection Manager at Vermont Yankee. I was the previous Radiation Protection Manager at Vermont Yankee Energy Corporation. and North Star has hired me to be their radiation protection manager as well. I'm responsible for the radiation protection program, for all the transportation and disposal of waste, and for the radiological environmental monitoring program. I used to be responsible for the non-radiological environmental programs. Those have been since passed off, much to my pleasure, because quite frankly, those are the areas I was the most uncomfortable with. However, with the radiation protection program and transportation of radioactive material, I've been very well versed in that for a very long time, so I'm very, very comfortable with that. So as you can see, here's just a graphic of the plant itself, right? So the place we're starting with right now, we've got people working right up here, and we're slowly but surely chiseling away at the reactor vessel and the internal components. We've started that work activity as of April 22nd of this year. So I imagine there you go, look at that, perfect. So a little bit about the information about the site. We're boiling water PWR. We're at 620 megawatts is what the rating was. This is an old picture. It's a picture of the plant and the facilities that existed before we made some modifications to it. In fact, it was quite some time ago, because you can see there's cars out in the parking lot. That didn't exist again until recently when the security requirements got dismissed. But however, you can see the cooling towers. The reactor building is the large gray cement structure. The one in front of that's the turbine building. And that's where we've got work activities going on right now. Many of the structures that you see on site now, we've got some more pictures that you'll see. We have gotten rid of a lot of those structures. They've gone away. Some of the non-radioactive areas of the plant, non-RC, non-radiologically controlled areas of the plant, some warehouse areas and so forth have just gone away. We've demolished them and taken them off site, including the cooling towers.
What's the green building?
The green building is the turbine building.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're BWR, so our turbine has radioactive constituents associated with contamination on the inside of it. So we are sending all those components to the DCS.
I actually got to go there 6 months before you shut it down.
Oh, what's that, sorry?
I got to go there 6 months before it closed.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Good. I was not around for that one. I apologize. I was out for a period of time.
That's a different picture, though.
That is very much a different picture. So with this one's in here, this has got a little bit of historical reference for us, if you will. There's also a switch yard that's north of the plant now, north of the original switch yard and so forth. But I kind of like this one because it is what I remember at the beginning. So here's some of the changes that have taken place on site. This building was out back. That building's completely gone. The cooling towers, gone. There are no cooling towers left. The only thing left of the cooling towers right now is the concrete structure that's in the ground. So one cooling tower was emergency cooling water in the event that we had a loss at the river, and that was called the deep basin. That thing was about 15 feet deep and held about 1.3 million gallons of water that we could use and not have the access to the river to still cool the reactor. So that would be the west cooling tower. The east cooling tower is about 2.5 feet deep. That's it. So the cooling towers are gone except for the concrete now come out of the ground on down the line. The warehouse demo, that's planned for 2020. The OQ building is another building associated with the radioactive exhaust from the plant, and that we're going to start working on that in 2020. Currently, we are working in the turbine building and the reactor building. Our primary focus in the reactor building right now is the removal of the reactor vessel components and the segmentation of the internal reactor vessel components. And so far, we've gotten the reactor vessel head has been segmented and put into a box, and it's on its way to Texas as we speak. The dryer has been cut up into 3 separate sections, and ultimately those are in boxes right now, and we're preparing those to go out for shipping. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that's going to take. So some priorities on site, obviously safety is our highest priority. Radiological safety, of course, is the highest paramount in terms of the nuclear safety culture that we have remaining, right? We don't have an operating reactor anymore. We don't have to worry about the fuel. The fuel is being safely stored in dry cask storage. Industrial safety is one of the highest priorities we've got in environmental safety. We don't want to do anything to release any materials, radioactive or otherwise, to the environment at this point in time. Some radiological alarimetrics. At the beginning of the year, we weren't sure exactly where we were going to end up by the end of the year, so we took a big swag and said our dose for the year was going to be about 7 to 8 grams. Seems like a lot, but however, with all the work activities we thought that we were going to be taking care of, it was appropriate at the time. But what we've done is we've taken a look at where we're at and adjusted that goal based on the amount of work we have remaining to do this year. So as of 9/25, we're at 35 rem for the year, and our goal got adjusted down to 42.642 rem for the year. So you look at that, and that's a lot of dose, you think, right? But actually, in the overall scheme of things, at Vermont Yankee, we had outages over the years where we were routinely picking up about 30 to 40 around in an outage. Well, consider this. We've been in an outage since we shut down, so, and now we're really starting to take things apart. So now we're digging into the meat of the plant, if you will, and exposing ourselves. We're exposing sections of the facility that are highly contaminated. Safety metrics, as of this presentation, which was for October, was 185,261 man-hours. We had one reportable injury. A subcontractor was using a grinder. Probably could have used a better tool for the job, and it actually kicked back on him and caused him to nick his knee and got a couple stitches. Other than that, we haven't had any other problems from a safety perspective. Environmental, there have been no unplanned releases, and as it turns out, we did a characterization of the site from a non-radiological environmental perspective. And actually, I guess the word that came back from some of the state players is, wow, that's way cleaner than we thought it was going to be. And we said, we've been telling you that all along. Whenever we had a problem from a non-radiological standpoint, oil spill or something like that, we addressed it right away. We went after it right away, and it's really showing that way when they did the evaluation of the site. We have some more evaluation to go, however, it's looking really good right now with regard to that. So, this is just a little bit of project schedule review. So really, the big thing is large component segmentation of reactor vessel components from 2019 to 2020. We slipped a little bit in terms of our schedule in getting the facility to their honor personnel so they could start their work, and they had a couple glitches along the way, so that's going to fall behind a little bit. 2019 to 2020, pretty reasonable bet they might make it into 2020, early 2021, but that's okay. Large components from the facility, we're going to be working on those from 2019 to 2022. Right now, we are working on the turbine components, and we've sent an awful lot of material from the turbine deck off to WCS for disposal at this point, and we'll continue to do so. All right, so this is a nice picture to show you. This is the primary activity of the facility right now. This is up on the refuel floor. We've got a lot of activities going on. If you take a look here, this is the spent fuel pool, and you can see all these gridded little lines there. That was our fuel pool racks. You can see there is nothing in those fuel pool racks right now. All of the fuel is in dry fuel storage. So those racks have since been removed from the facility, and we're in the process of getting those to Texas for disposal as well. They received the first three, I believe it was about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. We've got a shielded rail car to ship those in because the radiation levels were too high to ship them in a conventional rail car. So we actually developed a shielded rail car for that purpose. A couple of things that you're looking at here. This is the area above the reactor cavity. That area had shield blocks that went down above the reactor. Then the drywall had that big dome right there. That came out. As you can imagine, that's a pretty big object. Well, guess what? That thing went in before we got finished building the plant. So guess what we had to do with that before we take it downstairs? We had to cut it up into pieces. So we cut that up into 4 separate pieces, sent it downstairs. The shield blocks we had to cut in half and sling up and send down. So it's been a lot of figuring things out as you go, because there's no book in how to cut up a reactor and all of its components and get it out of the facility. And the equipment hatch is about 22 feet, both 22 feet square. So you've only got so much room. So we had to cut up objects just to get them downstairs. Over here you can see we are doing an awful lot of shipping in bags, and they're industrial package 1 bags, which are completely acceptable for putting things in to send down the highway. And ultimately, those are fuel racks right there. It's a very large optics going into the rail car, and I mentioned the shielded rail car. We actually have this rail car made. That's inch-thick seal on the sides. The radiation levels on contact with the object were not high enough to preclude shipping. However, the 2-meter readings were too high to ship, so we had to do something, and what we did was we built a shielded rail car to do it. So we knocked the dose rates down by about a little bit more than half, and that got us to where we need to be to legally send them down the road. So in the effort to make sure we do everything the way we should be doing it, that's as far as we've gone. So that rail car actually cost us about $68,000 just to be able to ship those objects. However, in commissioning business, that'll be a very good thing for WCS and Northstar to have access to in the future. So anyway, some of the things, the preparations for the RV segmentation. We had various components in the dryer separator pit, which is an area where we store the dryer and the separator. Moisture separator whenever we were in outages. We had what we call a gun barrel, and it doesn't really do it justice. The gun barrel was actually these large circular tubes that were within a fixed structure that we could put control rod blades in temporarily when we were doing maintenance on the facility. However, being where it was used and where it was stored and so forth, it was highly contaminated. We had to do something with that, so we've actually taken that, moved it, we've routed it up so that we can knock the radiation levels down to get it into the point where we can ship them, and we've had to do that with a lot of materials. We've had to draw out boxes and so forth, so we could actually ship them down the road. There was an insulation package just under the drywall head. I talked about the drywall head getting cut up, and then ultimately the shield blocks I already talked about. We've got rid of those. And there is the spent fuel pool, and here is what the spent fuel pool looks like empty. So that, to be honest with you, based on what we did, what we started with, was quite an undertaking. It's a little bit different than a PWR because you have to consider the fact that in our spent fuel pool, you do an awful lot of work in the spent fuel pool, and you take an awful lot of extremely highly activated components, you cut them up and do things with them. And guess where all that little residual stuff ends up at? On the bottom of the spent fuel pool. So when we got down to the bottom of the spent fuel pool and the bottom of these racks, we had a lot of work to do. And the radiation levels underwater at the bottom of this thing ranged from 4 to 25 arc per hour throughout fuel racks in the bottom of the floor. And little by little, we captured all that material in filters. We went ahead and we flushed it and sent it to different locations, and ultimately we will absorb it into filters and demineralizers on down the line, and it will end up in Texas as well. But we did send off a shipment of filters to Texas earlier this year as a result of cleaning up the fuel pool, and that was a Type B quantity of radioactive material. I can't remember, I think it was about 67 curies in that shipment. So, here you go. Here's the turbine building components. As you can see, this is real status. These are pictures that were taken just about a month ago. And this is what we're doing with the turbines. So we had 2 low-pressure turbines. There's one there and one there. You can't see the high-pressure turbine in this particular picture. Before you could see this, these are casings that were coming off that covered it up, right? Right here you can see the actual low-pressure turbine, and you've got this component right here going to the generator. That's what was coupled to the generator. That spun the moneymaker, right? So all these components now have become trash, and we are slowly but surely clipping them up, making them smaller, handling them, putting them into gondola cars, and shipping them to Texas for disposal. And this has been an incredible amount of work, and right now we are in the process of removing rotor components. So, and it just continues onward. In the very near future, we expect by the end of the year to be done essentially with the turbine, and then we'll be moving on to the condensers. Just to let you know, though, when the project first started, this wasn't even on the table to be done this year. We went ahead and staffed up a group of people and started doing the planning and said, you know what? Let's just go ahead and work on it. It's low-dose work. Let's get rid of this stuff now and do it in parallel with the activities that take place on the refuel floor. So we should see significant progress in the turbine building. Another thing that's going on in the turbine building right now is, you can imagine, in a steam plant, you got an awful lot of insulation. Well, as years went by, once we realized that asbestos was no good for people to breathe, as asbestos insulation got replaced, we replaced it with just regular insulation, fiber of some kind. But we still have a lot of asbestos insulation. So right now we have crews working their way through the turbine building, and they're removing asbestos from the plant. And as of right now, we've shipped off about 26,000 cubic feet of insulation, asbestos and non-asbestos. So just to give you an idea, we're progressing forward, and we're sending as much waste to Texas as we can. And the reason we have to do that is because we need to make room for the next things we're doing, right?
Does that go to the RICWA?
That's going to the record facility, exactly.
I'm getting good at that.
Yeah, you're getting good at this. Yes.
So the majority of the asbestos-containing material is not contaminated with radioactivity?
So essentially, whatever we have that comes out of the turbine building, we're not taking the time to survey. I would guess if you actually took a hard look, there's a fair amount that we could release. However, how you release it, you've got to survey it, and then you've got to take it out of the bag to survey it. And guess what we're not doing with asbestos? It's going to the record facility, which is more appropriate. So, and obviously, when we ship it there, we clearly identify what's asbestos and what's not, and then it gets distributed, and they take it and put it in the appropriate locations. I'm guessing you guys don't run it over with tractors and bulldozers when you're putting it in place. So,
Special requirements for ACF, so it has to be treated specially.
yes, and it gets segregated from the other way so that there had to be some changes made to the facility. We're going to ship by rail. So previous to this, we had rail spurs on site, but they had not been used. We had a rail spur. This one actually did exist and went over to the turbine building. This one over here did not exist, and that actually, let me correct myself. Yeah, this right here existed. This one right here that goes over to that building did not exist. So the purpose of that one was so that we'd have a facility in which we could manipulate and deal with some of the rail cars that we have on site in an area we don't have to worry about the weather elements, if you will. So that's really what that building was put in place for. And it's turned out to be quite a nice little facility in terms of being able to do stuff undercover, so you can continue work activities, move a rail car over, do things to it, and so forth. Also, we've got various rail cars that will be coming on site and rail cars that will be for the purpose of shipping casks. And I'll go ahead and take a look at those in just a moment. But these are some of the modifications that are made. Another thing that just got done last week, the rail line that comes into the facility comes in from Route 142 area. I don't know if you've ever been in Brattleboro and you've seen the rail line that runs right along the river. So it runs right along the river, and then it comes into our facility right off the bat. And that rail line comes into the facility, and what we did was we put what we call a runaround in. So we put in 2 switches so that rail cars can come in, and then ultimately when we push them back out, we've got a place to push them back out to, so we can keep on moving things around. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to move anything. Otherwise, you're shuffling all over the place, which is quite frankly tedious, and it's a lot of moving stuff around. It's kind of interesting and funny that, so we have people we've got this thing right here. That's called a rail mover, and that is nothing more than a really tiny little locomotive, if you will. It's a diesel powered unit, and it can push a fully loaded rail car out, no problem. It can pull a chain of rail cars in and out. Surprisingly, it's not that big, but we have a little bit of a hill, and some guys from WCS came to our facility to teach these guys how to use the rail mover. And he came in and he looked at we didn't think much of it. It just kind of rolls down a little bit. It's Vermont. We get way bigger hills than that. We're looking at it. He says, "Whoa, that's a big hill." I said, "Really? You think that's a big hill?" I said, "No, I'm telling you, that's really big. If you lost control of something, it's going to keep on going." I said, "Okay, I got it. We're good." So he really cautioned the guys that operate the rail mover about that you really got to treat that with care when you're coming down that hill, and you got to get a little bit of a running start. You got a fully loaded car to get it up, because I've actually seen a couple of times where there's rain and you see the wheels doing this and slipping a little bit. But so far, things are going very well. So we've been very pleased. All right, so this is just a little bit of an example of some of the just demolition for non-radioactive areas of the plant. This was the construction office building right here, and that's what you're looking at. We went in there, and once they get going on it, you clear it out completely. You isolate the electricity by cutting wires, so you got complete separation. And we isolate everything from it, all the water, the fire water, and so forth. And they went in and just chewed it up. It was a matter of a week and a half, 2 weeks, it was gone. And they were still loaded. It took a while to load it out. So that one, in that case, that's what you see, just the pads left. Since then, we turned that pad into an area where we're taking radioactive materials. We built up a shield wall around it, and we're using that area for processing and filling custom boxes with cement. And the cement, the purpose of cement is to get us to the point where we can ship the boxes down the road. I'll talk about that when we get to them. This is an example of the cooling tower, the demolition. Basically, at first they tried to go ahead and line it up and cut things and pull it down. And it didn't work out quite as well as they thought. However, what they found out was you got a really big excavator like that, you grab onto one of those big pipes, you start beating the heck out of it, it falls down. And that's really what happened. So they knocked it down, we cleaned it all up. Just to let you know, even for items that are not in an RC area, we do some survey of it. In areas like that where the potential existed, someone could have dragged some contamination into the building. We do about a 10% survey of the area and just verify what we've got. We also survey every large transport conveyance that's leaving site with the sodium iodide detector. We're doing a last-ditch effort to see, is there anything there at all? We see anything inflections above background. If we do, we would stop and we would search for it to figure out what we got until we had run it to ground. So anyway, you can see the cooling towers coming down, and then ultimately that's them standing up initially, and that's what it looks like right now. They're gone. So some pretty big changes on site. The skyline has changed. That's what, these demolition guys, as they say, the skyline's changing. Okay, they're very much into that. So let's move on to the segmentation. So this is the reactor vessel head, and that has gotten cut up into 5 pieces. It got put into a very large box. So imagine this, we got a box, it's about 14 feet long, it is around 10 feet tall, and about 9.5 feet wide. Now, this box is pretty stout because it's inch thick steel all the way around, all sides, 1 inch thick. And then we take this component, put it inside of it, and then we move this component downstairs under that pad I was talking about before with the shield around it, the shield wall around it that we build out of cement blocks. And we pump low density grout. So is anyone familiar with low density grout term? Low density grout is about the same density as water. Now, how do you do that, right? You have to put an additive into it, it creates air bubbles, but it provides the same shielding as water would. So ultimately, what the boxes were designed to do with these individual components. So Arano came up with this plan, and they execute the getting the components cut up to the right size and putting them into these boxes. And then ultimately, they've got ports on top. We go ahead and pump this low density grout into the box, and we can only do it in 30-inch lifts, or otherwise it would compress it too much and make it too dense, and then the box would be too heavy. Until the point where we fill it up, and we've got to fill it up at least 90% full for the disposal purposes. And then ultimately we send it to Texas, and what that does for us, it puts enough additional shielding into the box so that we can meet the transportation requirements and send it down the road on a rail car. So the other thing is that these boxes, the first box we sent out weighed about 230,000 pounds. So to give you an idea, we had to take 2 cranes to lift this thing up to put it on a rail car. We put it on the rail car, and then ultimately you weld the blocking and bracing in place on a steel flat rail car to hold that box in place. So it's a pretty big evolution from when you consider the fact that by the time we start working on it, cutting it up, and then getting it packaged and sending it down the road, it took months to get rid of that reactor vessel head. So at various stages of work activity. So this right here is the dryer, all right? So the dryer sits in this location right here. And so the steam would come, so this is the reactor vessel from here to here, the actual active portion of the reactor. This is the upper grid plate. This is the moisture separator, and then this is the dryer. So what would happen is the steam would come up and go through here, would go through the moisture separator, and those were tubes with little veins on the inside of it like this, and that was to strip the water out of them, and then it sent them through these guys, which were chevron blades, if you will. And that's how the steam would get taken out of these, how the water would be removed from the steam, so it had the highest quality, the least amount of water in it, so it would not cause damage to the turbine. So the dryer was probably about, I believe, the dose rates were 2.5 rem per hour, about a foot off the dryer. So pretty good dose rate for anyone that's familiar. And ultimately, what we did was we cut this up dry. So when they took it out, we actually spray coated it with a fixative, so we could fix the contamination on the outside in place. And then we went ahead and set up a diamond wire saw, if anyone's familiar. So you set up all these pulleys so that the diamond wire saw can cut it. And the first cut was around this way. So we cut off the bottom of the dryer. Then we separated the 2 pieces. Then we cut these pieces up into 6 separate pieces. And then we cut the dryer right here and right here. And then this portion went into one box, this portion went into another box, and the center piece and these little side pieces went into the next box. So, as you can imagine, I had a locked high radiator air condition, and for us that's greater than 1,000 millirem per hour, 30 centimeters. That's what I was dealing with the whole time from a radiological perspective. So we got this all cut up, we got them into the boxes. So, remember I told you the first box was 1 inch thick on all sides? Some of these boxes are 4.5 thick on one side, 3.5 inches thick on the other side. The guy that designed it so that once it got put in the box, we'd be at a certain dose rate, and once we put grout in it, we'd be able to ship it. And so far, everything's worked out. A little bit conservative, but that's okay. I'd rather have them conservative, because if we couldn't, we have to come up with contingencies to be able to ship it, right? So right now, the dryer is in 3 separate boxes, and those boxes are being filled with low density grout right now. One of them is completely done. That's going to be getting put on a rail car next week, and one by one we'll get rid of those as well. So this represents a significant quantity of work. This was a fair amount of my exposure. The bad news is this was a lot of my exposure for the year. The good news is the next activities, when we get done with a few more activities, then we're flooding back up and everything's going to get done underwater from there. So that'll greatly reduce our actual radiation exposure for the plant employees over a period of time. So anyway, reactor vessel head's done. Steam dryer is getting ready to go. Reactor studs, if you're familiar, basically this thing has studs that went through it. We had bolts that came down on it. Those studs are getting removed next. And then once we get rid of those, we'll be able to flood back up. We'll finish prepping for the underwater work, and then we'll flood back up. And then all the other work will be done underwater until we get the internal components out. Once we get the internal components out of the reactor vessel, then we start draining it down little by little, and then start chiseling away. So once we get rid of all this stuff down here, then we start draining down, and we start going after the reactor vessel chunk by chunk at top. And this is over the course of the next year and a half, 2 years. So, and little by little, we will get rid of all those components. So these components are going in big boxes. Okay, so the reactor vessel internals, let me go back. So this and this are going into big boxes. The rest of this stuff is going into what they call RWCs. All right, so now, here we go. Big boxes, that's them, monsters. Most of the boxes weigh around over 100,000 pounds empty. Some will weigh about 150,000 pounds empty. So you see the numbers on the sides? The reason they're numbered is because when we orient these various components, there's been enough rad engineering done to say, here's how you have to position them. They have to be at this location and this location in relationship to the sides, here and here, to center them up here, so that whenever we do float and grout, we've got the right dose rates coming out of it. So like I said, the dryer and the moisture separator are going into these boxes. Then ultimately, we switch over to RWCs. These are nothing but rad waste containers. For anyone who's familiar with dry fuel storage, this is what a dry fuel storage container looks like. An awful lot like that, except these are opened up in the middle, and there's nothing inside of them. And then the ones that would handle fuel are gridded to the inside with borated metal, borated infrastructure, so that it maintains the neutron flux down. So anyway, these things will get moved to the refuel floor, and they'll get put into a transfer cask. And this is the transfer cask. It will go into the transfer cask, and the transfer cask will go to the refill floor. It'll get put into the water with this RWC in it. The RWC will be filled with radioactive material. A little go on that, then you pull it out of the water. We've got an area where we prep it. You blow the water out of it, and then ultimately you dry it, you vacuum dry it. You get all the water out of it completely. And then it goes down, then it goes back downstairs. It gets put onto this right here. Then it gets put into a storage module. These storage modules are, they call them horizontal transfer system. They call them new homes horizontal storage. You can call them whatever you want. At other facilities that hold fuel, in this case, they're going to hold radioactive materials. So we've got 3 of these modules on site right now. What's going to happen is, as soon as we get the first RWC out, which is going to be our much higher level waste, which is going to Texas, the compact waste facility, ultimately, these will go to the compact waste facility for disposal, and at the compact waste facility, WCS has manufactured these for themselves, and that whole module will be put into the compact waste facility with our waste inside of it, and that's the way that'll work. So this right here that you're looking at, that is very unique. It does not have its impact numbers on it, but that is a cask that carries one of these RWCs. It can also carry fuel. It just recently got licensed to carry radioactive materials besides fuel. So that cask can carry up to 70,000 curies of cobalt-60 equivalent. Pretty significant. And what's even more significant is that's the only real big shipping cask for shipping fuel in the country right now. And that's the TN ramps, the TN America system. So that's the system we're using here at DY. So if you take a look at this thing's a shield right here, and this right here, if anyone's, basically it's a ramp. You push it in there and it slides it right into place, and then we back it up and put the door back in place, and that's how we maintain our dose as low as we possibly can while we're handling this fuel, or we're handling the waste in this particular case. So this see. There's a picture of the box with the reactor vessel head sitting in it upstairs, up right up to the top right. That's what it looked like before we put concrete in it. There's more concrete in there than the reactor vessel head right now. So, anyway, pretty significant. Any questions about any of this? We go on and on. You do.
Maybe it's abnormal.
Go ahead.
How much technology can you borrow from these How much, are you, like you just said, that was a new innovation? Like you're going, that's new.
Oh, what's new? Actually,
Well, some
this,
things are new, but
some things are new, some things are not. The technology for this stuff has been,
because, I mean, obviously, decommissions don't have that today.
no, no, no.
But when
So-
was the last
so-
decommission like this?
Well, so let's see. In the United States, maybe Zion's been in progress for a while. Zion's been going on for quite a period of time. But I would say that the last one, Humboldt Bay was just wrapped up, and that was one that they put in the States for a long time, and then it's finishing up. So it looks like more and more we're going to be going towards directly to decommissioning with that. So one thing that we do have is the system that Iran is using. That was used at a boiling water reactor in Germany. And the part that they're using in particular, some of the tooling that we're going to be using, and the high-pressure underwater abrasive cutting of the reactor vessel internal components and so forth.
I'm reading classes all the time.
Oh, cool. I'm glad to hear that.
I'm just curious.
I'm pretty impressed too. So anyway, that's where we're at with that. So those are the custom boxes. All those internal components are going into RWDCCs because the activity is going up higher, and we've got to be able to put them in a cast like that to ship them. And then when we get back to the reactor vessel itself, that'll get cut up and put into other boxes like this. So we've got 9 RWDCCs that we got to get taken care of, and we've got 8 boxes we're taking care of initially, and another 9 after that, and then the reactor vessel will be gone. So, waste shipped to Texas. I know this is paramount on everyone's mind. So far, we've shipped 56,029 cubic feet to Texas, of which spent fuel racks have gone there. We're not done with those yet. Components from the spent fuel pool, large turbine components. DAW convention and trash, we're constantly generating that, constantly. You know, as we go in and do a job and then we clean up after everything, you end up with all sorts of junk that you need to get rid of because you've contaminated it. Insulation in a big way, the asbestos containing the non-asbestos waste. And compact waste facility, we haven't sent much to yet, but when we get back to here, so with the custom boxes, that all go in the compact waste facility, and all the other RWDCCs will be going to the compact waste facility. These guys right here typically are going to be either very high in the Class A range or in the Class B or C range for waste, and these are about 200 cubic feet, the actual container itself. So,
That's a question on this one.
this one,
This one, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Those custom boxes, you mentioned they're welded to the,
You see this right here?
vessel that's transported. Okay, so that's the.
So that gets put on the rev bar. So we prep the rev bar surface,
Right.
and they get put on, and then we have chunks of metal that get welded. So in each spot where you see this slot, there's a piece that goes there, and they get welded. They get put in place, and it's an integral piece. It slides right to that slot,
Right.
and then that gets welded in place.
So they're not placed into any other conventional shipping container. They are effectively.
They're ready to go. Those are
Those
approved IP2 packages that can carry the materials that they have.
Okay.
And they can be opened up like that because the dose rates are appropriate because we put grout in it.
Is that meeting long existing NRC standards for shipping material? Do they have to go through some NRC
That is
approval?
meeting all the standards required to safely and legally ship this material down the road. We met the DOC and the NRC standards.
So the next slide with the yellow crane is the next move to that particular, is that the same box?
Oh, this was just moving a box. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is the lifting apparatus made for all these boxes.
What my question, just specifically goes to, did they meet long-standing, long-approved NRC requirements? And so this was technically or regulatorily easy step, or did you need to get some special approval for those particular boxes from NRC?
So the manufacturer can manufacture these to meet the requirements of the specifications for the IP2 package. And that's exactly what they did.
Good.
CPC, Container Products Corporation, they routinely manufacture boxes They meet the requirements for IP2 patches specified for the transport of radioactive materials in the United States.
Yeah, because that goes back to my same thing is, if we're going to have more new missions, what can we learn from this project, and what did you learn from previous projects?
And I think a lot of the learning is going to come from honing in what you really need in relationship to what you expect. Another thing that, unfortunately, because it was announced in August 27th of 2013 that we were shutting down. We had done our last refueling that spring. So if we had known we were shutting down, there's a whole bunch of things we could have done to get ready for decommissioning, and we didn't know we were getting shut down, so no one did anything, right? That was one of the problems. That was one of the problems, and that's why the custom boxes are conservatively designed by the guy that did it, because he wasn't sure what things were going to be, so he put in a factor of conservancy that he may not have put in had he had real service. If he had recent radiological conditions of those components, he might have said, okay, we don't need 3.5 inches, we need 2, right? And that's what he would have done. He would have made it so we very easily comply with the regulations. However, we don't get any delays in trying to do what we get to. So anyway, so the last part is that we've only sent one line of Class A waste. And that was in the RT100. It was a WCS cast that we used. And then we sent one custom box off. So far, we've got 3 yet ready to go. And as I said, once we start working through the rest of this project, there'll be a lot of components going to the compact waste facility. Plus, we have other waste on site that does need to go to the compact waste facility. However, it's currently in a safe location where it's not bothering anything. So we will get to that when we get to it. We've got other issues that are bigger and more burning for us right now. One of the bigger issues is to get the turbine building done so we've got space to do other things. The one thing that got us a little bit backed up in the beginning was that we really weren't ready to get rid of the waste yet. And because of that, we got kind of backed up, and it was very difficult to do some of the work we had to do. I mean, you got to put the waste somewhere, but you want to be able to do work in the same proximity. It makes it challenging. So we're finally over that. We're moving forward, and now we're in a place where we know the thing we've got to do is, and the easiest way to maintain your radiation exposure as low as reasonably achievable is handle something once. Don't handle it twice, because all you're doing is picking up more dose. So basically what we're doing is we're trying to get everything we handle, we want to handle it, get it into the transport vehicle, send it off to Texas for disposal, and move on to the next thing. So that's where we're at.
When do you think the turbine building will be done?
So,
Is that the first thing?
I
mean, you're working on that other.
I know. So the reactor vessel and all that stuff was very well. They spent 1.5 years planning that out. The turbine building, we kind of said, people came to a group of us and said, well, what do you think we ought to work on besides that? So certainly should go after the turbine. That'll come apart, and we'll tear that apart and send it off for disposal. So we're going to we expect to have the turbine done by about the end of the year, maybe into next year. The rest of the turbine building, it's hard to say. I'm not sure what the actual goals are. We're going to keep on plowing through it. The next goal would be to go after the condensers. Right now, we're removing the asbestos and insulating materials off the condensers. We've got 1/2 of that isolated, and that's what they're working on right now. So if we keep on progressing the way we are, I would expect to have much of the turbine cleared out about the same time they're finishing up the reactor vessel activities. So about 2 years.
One thing said y'all be done by 2030. I think you'll be done before that.
It's possible. It's a very realistic possibility. So, yeah, once we get going.
You got a pretty aggressive
It's been very aggressive so far, very aggressive. So, and it's going to stay right about there. I think we're going to stay on this pace. And the ironic part is we really actually have a fairly small staff. So we've got the ironic person on site, and but we've got a very small staff working in the turbine building. We've expanded that just a little bit because we were getting backed up in certain areas, and you realize pretty quickly, logistically, if you can't, guess what it's about? Handling the waste and moving it around. And what we realized was, if you don't keep it moving, you're going to stop other work activities, and that you're just spinning your wheels. So we actually brought in some additional people just for that. So that's where we're at right now. Things are going very well so far.
Most of the people, North Star employees, or y'all contract?
There's a handful of North Star employees, and there's a fair amount of contract employees. So it seems to be the wave of the future, if you will. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't really see the difference in people. It's like we're all one big team that everyone's treated the same. So, yeah, it hasn't really seemed to make a difference. And the North Star folks, they came on site, and everything that used to say energy now says North Star. It's actually kind of funny. And T-shirts, here's your North Star T-shirts. Wear them, get out there. So it's just interesting, you know, you laugh about that, but I mean, that's how you put your mark on someone, right? And then when you put your mark on someone, and someone just handed me a shirt to wear, a jacket to wear, a reflective thing that says North Star on it, you start to feel like that's what I am, right? Whether you work for RSCS or TSSD or whoever, you start to feel like it, because that's who's running it, that's who's paying the bills and who's taking care of business. So.
From all the rags I read, y'all own it now, so.
Yeah. So.
Got your coat or jacket.
That's what I got my jacket. I got my reflective stuff, I'm good. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a few questions. Number one, what's it gonna look like when you're done?
It should look like essentially a field of grass, if you will.
Front lawn
As of this point, with the agreement that we have with the state, right? With the agreement we have with the state, that's what it should look like at this point. However, Dick, I would say this, it's probably very much negotiable based on if someone really wants to use the property for something else and wants to purchase it, that maybe the possibility exists that that'll change if the person that wants to purchase it. I don't want a greenfield, I want to put in a manufacturing facility. So I don't know.
What about transmission? You've got a big substation down there and everything.
Those transmission lines are staying where they're at.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the idea might be that another generator could go there.
There was a recent thing from BPR, and it talked about a businessman that is in Vernon talking about the potential of purchasing the property at the end of this for the purpose of developing some business in the area so that he can maintain the tax base that he had with a place like Vermont Yankee.
I'm kind of curious about how North Star and WCS deal with each other.
Pretty well so far.
Well, is that an arm's length transaction?
So
For
arm's
instance,
length.
one of the things that this commission, I think, has to be kind of cognizant of and concerned about is the success, the business success of WCS, which has, as you know, been marginal over the years. And I'm just, you know, given that you both have a common parent, how does that work? How does that relationship work in terms of?
I think that the president of the WCS could probably speak to that better than the RPM, Vermont Yankee.
You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, so we do have some common ownership, and that's JF Lehman, but we don't have all the same ownership. So we have other owners in addition. I'm not sure, but I assume North Star has other owners in addition. So we have to be. You know, we have an obligation to be independent companies operating.
Okay, so you basically, getting down to money, you basically charge them full freight when they dispose at your plant.
Absolutely, we charge them full freight in compact prices, same as South Texas Project would pay, same as Comanche Peak would pay. They're on that scale, so it's a much lower scale of payments, but it's the same as any compact utility.
So they send you waste, you send them a bill.
Oh yeah, they do. Absolutely. And I get to review those, and none of them are small.
Right, so the contract is very much a commercial contract. The relationship is very much a commercial relationship. We do have people on site at the facility, so we integrate very closely. We do, plan in concert so that when Mike is getting ready to ship something, we want to be absolutely ready to have our transporter there and to move it as quickly as possible to get it out of his way. So we integrate closely, but it's a commercial relationship.
And WCS is on site. My shipper is a WCS employee. The person that is managing the logistics for shipping, WCS employee.
Okay, and North Star is paying WCS for that service. And I didn't quite get whether the shipping is entirely by rail or partially by rail.
So we have shipped some things by truck. As I stated, getting rid of things is way better than handling it twice. So we didn't have the rail spur done yet. So initially we shipped some things by truck. Casks, normal casks like the RT100, that will go by truck because it's designed to go by truck. The big cask that is TN America's cask, it carries the NWCs, that will go by rail exclusively. There are, if I were to show you a picture of the truck that carried that to Texas, you would be amazed. That thing had to be 100, 120 feet long and had a truck pulling it and a truck pushing it. That's how big it was.
But Commissioner, the vast majority of everything that goes by rail.
Yes.
It's only a very small.
So you're really using your rail spur now. There was quite a period when that was dormant, kind of, but.
That's a very significant activity for us. At a future meeting, I'll show some pictures of kind of the other end of this operation and things arriving so you can see that, but rail is very active on site.
An issue that sort of drives that, Dick, is weight. You can only put so much legally on the highway. And once you exceed that limit, it has to go by rail.
Or you have to get permits all the way through, and quite frankly, that's like, wow.
It's much more difficult. It's easier to just put it on a rail car.
So the other thing too is not only that, so some of the rail cars we're sending, in New England, we're limited to 263,000 pounds on the rail in our area. There's a couple bridges that need to be upgraded before they can go to the full 286,000 pounds. So 286,000 pounds for a rail car and its load is the normal limit. If you go above that weight limit, then you have to have it, instead of a rail car with 2 trucks, you have to have 4 trucks on it, right? So now you can distribute the load over a larger area, and it's absorbing, so you can go to a higher weight. So for these rail cars, the first 4 we're sending in these boxes, those are overweight, and we're having to use the 4-truck rail cars as opposed to the 2-truck rail cars. Now the last 4 boxes will go back to 4 trucks and 2 trucks, and then I think some of the boxes the second time around will be there too. But the cask that's on the rail car, that is 8 trucks, just like the ones we're carrying the custom box with. So that cask goes down the rail overweight already. So there's a lot of logistics in moving that cask around. It's amazing.
So when it's all said and done, do you have an estimate of the volume and curies that will be sent to RECRA versus the compact waste facility?
Not with me right now, but I probably have that written down somewhere in some estimates that we had initially.
But your estimates have been proven out. I guess that's my question.
Yeah, and they have. However, the one thing that they did do was there have been some changes made to the record facility, which have allowed us to ship more to the record facility than we would have before. There were some amendments made to that criteria, and that was very recent, wasn't it, Dave?
Yes, in fact, that was a procedure change relative to how those rates were handled and sort of those.
So that went up a little bit, so we can actually send a little bit more. But in the overall scheme of things, the stuff we were going to send to the compact waste facility, such as the reactive components, that's going there no matter what, the activities. So the activity is the limiting factor, right? So activity and dose rate. Dose rate used to tip us over before the activity did, right? So the activities, if you will, Class A limits are what they are, about 10%. I'm not going to go on record and say it's exactly 10%. It's different isotopes. I've looked at it, different isotopes vary a little bit. But ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So the activity being about 10%, we were never even coming close to that, but the dose rates would knock us out of the park board. And they increased the dose rates a little bit, which allowed us to send some material to the low activity waste cell or the record facility that we wouldn't have been able to ship there before.
So I've heard the statistic being roughly 85% of the volume from this decommissioning will go to RECRA. However, when it comes to the curies, it'll be reversed. About 85% of the curies will end up in the compact facility.
I would go on record and say 95 to 96% of the curies is going to the compact waste facility. Most of what we send to the RECRA facility will have almost no activity on it. And some of it, as I stated before, really comes down to, is it worth frisking it or surveying it in relationship to just putting it in a rail car and sending it for disposal when I have to survey it and then I have to cut out this piece? Well, let's just go ahead and send it to the record facility because it costs me less than the overall scheme of things. So there's that balancing act you get to play.
And what percentage of your total demolition or decommissioning waste what total percentage of that is going to neither the RECRA nor the compact waste facility, but a traditional or industrial landfill?
You know, I couldn't even tell you right now.
Is it a high percentage though, or?
No.
Okay.
It will not be a high percentage. No. Not in relationship to their overall.
Right.
But for example, you showed us that office complex that got demoed.
That
probably went to a local landfill somewhere.
It did. It went to a facility down in Massachusetts.
Sure.
And when it went, and so the other part is, if you take a look at volume, it's an awful lot of volume, but that's only because you can't pack it efficiently. Those trucks are going down the road underweight, right?
Very light.
I mean, we could put more on it, we could fit it. The cooling towers is a perfect example. So the cooling towers is nothing more than a whole bunch of plastic and wood down below that whole structure, and it's wide open. So packing that into a vehicle that would be able to carry 45,000 pounds, we might be getting 10,000 pounds into it at the most, right? And the thing's filled to the brim. So that gives you an idea of what you're doing. Really low density stuff is what that is. So.
Do you have any other questions for Mr. Fletcher?
Yeah, I have a general question. How do you feel about the way this is working as compared to what you see in the industry and other plants that are kind of beginning to undergo the same procedures?
So, all we've got is the ones that we've dealt with and compare ourselves to. So Kewanee, they're going into safe storage. They're there, and they're not interested in doing decommissioning yet. I don't know that they're going to change their mind. Crystal River got themselves to a specie only, and they just come to terms, and it was Duke Power, and they've come to terms with North Star, and North Star is going to take over the facility sometime next year. So they're following in the same pathway as us. So I expect that to go in a similar fashion. The only other company I know that's besides Energy Solutions that's dealing with purchasing power plants for the purpose of taking over and essentially doing it efficiently so they can make some money off the decommissioning fund would be Holtec, and that's to be seen. Holtec was at our facility for the purpose of dry flow storage. I really don't have a whole lot to say about them other than the fact that they started the job and they got done with the job, right? I mean, there were a lot of corrections along the way. They had a lot more support from, I believe the term was turnkey when they came on site. They weren't exactly, in my eyes, as turnkey as I expected them to be. They needed a lot more support from the facility that remained at DY to get them to where they had to get to. So, we did a lot of recommending for them to hire the right people. That was probably one of the key components for them, was getting the right people on site so they could do the job. Once they got to that point, they started moving along successfully and smoothly. It took them a while to get to that point. So I can't really compare myself to other places that I haven't seen yet, but I know who's jumping into the works with it. And I know it's Holtec's got Oyster Creek and Pilgrim. I believe they're slotted to get Indian Point and Palisades as well. So, but I can't speak to them because they haven't gotten this far yet. However, what I will tell you, Dick, is that it is a competitive industry, and the nuclear industry where I used to share information, I'm not quite as willing to share information as I used to be, based on the fact that the people I work for said we're not sharing with them. And I understand why. This is competitive now.
Probably a healthy thing.
And it probably is. So.
Will there be any components that would be put into a safe store situation from VY?
No.
Everything will be gone.
Everything will be gone except for the switchgear and so forth. And remember, I talked about it some meetings ago. The agreement, we go down 4 feet into the ground, and then we get everything radioactive out of there, and then ultimately, then we backfill that and leave that in place. Because it doesn't make sense to take concrete that's just concrete out of the ground, right? And it saves, what does it save you? It saves you an incredible amount of effort and money. It saves you an incredible amount of risk, right? Let's face it, tearing things apart is a very risky business. Putting things up is less risky than tearing them apart, because when you tear things apart, you may do something that didn't work out so well. And then the other part is, now I'm not putting that material on the road to cause potential risk for someone driving down the road and getting hit by a truck. So those are things that if you leave it on site, you mitigate the risk, and the actual risk to anyone that would be at that site is minimal or nothing. So.
In the total timeline, the judges said the goal is to have everything decommissioned and off-site by 2030?
That is the timeline right now. And like he said, I mean, I'd be surprised if it goes that much. But that's the official word. How's that? So, another thing that we did along the way, just to fill you in, we actually had someone come and characterize the site from a radioactive perspective. They brought in a nice little buggy that had multi-channel analyzers set up on it. They rode around site with GPS and started plotting what we have on site. They found nothing of any significance. They found that we had radioactive material close to the buildings. Well, no kidding, it's in the buildings, so you can't really distinguish what's in the ground and what's not. They found out that we built one of our roads with a high level of potassium in it. Naturally occurring radioactive material, as Linda Morris can tell you, and as Mr. Saltzman can tell you, that it's just naturally in the environment. And it actually identified that. We could actually look at the graphic that they gave. You said, wow, that's the road. What's in that? And they said potassium. So otherwise, byproduct dosage tests, nothing of concern. So that's a good starting point for us, because we know there won't be very much remediation once we get done with the buildings and so forth. It'll just be a matter of going out, sampling and surveying, and clearing the area and getting to the point where we can call the NRC up and say, send the ORISE folks in and let them follow up with us.
Who did this? The survey?
Oh, it was a company called Wood PLC. So they had this nice little track buggy. They could go anywhere in it.
Who got them? The people, the committee?
Oh, North Star contracted them to do the ship. Yeah. And this really wasn't required to be done. It was more of an informational gathering thing at this point to say, okay, what's our starting point? And then once you know your starting point, then you have a good idea where you need to go. And if you control everything properly along the way, guess what? We'll do something like that again, but we're also going to have to get samples and dig down and stuff like that. But at least we were looking for anything that we needed to remediate or think about on that line, but we didn't find it. It was significant enough to worry about.
Did you have another question, Dave?
No.
Eddie?
When North Star purchased the Vermont Yankee site from their entity, they also were able to get the decommissioning plan.
That's great.
Can you tell us how much is in that decommissioning plan?
You know what? I would love to tell you if I knew. I know that it started out somewhere in the 500 million range, but I don't remember the exact number.
Dave, do you know how much the decommissioning plan?
I don't, but I think it's public information, so you ought to.
I thought it was closer to 60.
And it might have been, but I know contractually it had to be over 514 million. So I would go as far as to say 550 would be a good guess, but that would just be a guess. And it is probably public knowledge. You probably find that on the NRC location. At least a place to go figure out what it is. Because I can't say, I hate to say this, it's not that I don't care about money. I'm very concerned about being as economical as possible and work activities I'm associated with. However, I'm not the guy that tracks money, so that part's someone else's. I let other people do that so I can focus on my personal concerns. So.
I have one crazy question, but all these plants, they're leaving the wires up. It's like Dick says, is there a reason for that? Except maybe your plant goes to the wires and the wires company has it on and they're not going to tear down their infrastructure?
So something to realize is in any grid system, right, you have feeds going into it and feeds going out of it, but it's also a junction point for things. So not only can I feed power from Vermont Yankee to those locations, I can feed power from Northfield, Massachusetts, and send it through the line, then to the 115 kV line, and I can get it to Chesterfield, New Hampshire. That's why. That's why they're left in place. They also upgraded the 345 kV switchyard behind us to provide more reliable switching and so forth. Another thing they did years ago was they doubled the Coolidge line in Vermont, and that line runs all the way from Vernon to Coolidge, Vermont, which is up around here somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where. But it's doubled, so now they crisscross back and forth with that, so it makes that more reliable. So now if I have a problem here, I can bypass it and go around and still have this line come down and go around and feed off of that. So the reliability of the grid is what that has to do with.
Thank you very much, Mike. Is there any other questions? This is very informative. And what we will do for everyone's benefit is we will get Mike's PowerPoint and we will put it on our website to make it available as part of the link to this meeting so everyone can see it. Thank you very much.
And it's right on your PC already. So you need to get it to him.
He's infected your PC with whatever viruses it had.
If you need me to send you a copy,
I appreciate it. We have been going for a couple hours now, so why don't we take a quick break? I don't think we have much left, unless Dave wants to do more presentation than I expect him to. But otherwise, if we took about a 10-minute break real quick. We can all use the restroom, and then we'll be back about 11:30.
Real good idea.
Do that, frankly, get a UAV flight every 6 months. They're cheap. I mean, they cost nothing.
So, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. In fact, you probably have someone that has a UAV. that could do
Probably.
You say that, but industrially, we have to buy UAV insurance and so on when you're flying.
That's why we're gonna-
I actually deal with UAVs every day at the university. The insurance isn't that expensive.
But you're right, it would be good to do that. So it's ironic that you would say that, because then you would have seen my shield blocks. So we were getting ready to do all this work with these blocks. I said, guys, I hate to break the bad news. I got like limitations on what I can have at the site boundary. And in particular, the west site boundary is the closest one to anyone. So the other site boundaries across the river, so that's what it's off. And he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, I need shielding wrapped around these boxes. I got a bunch of boxes sitting out there. I got to do something with it, right? That's why we're shielding the heck out of these things in these big these overpacks. And so to my pleasure, because I am like a stickler for all the security stuff we've been doing over the years that quite frankly I think shields way more than warranted. We use security blocks as our shield.
Yeah, well, it works.
Like, this is perfect.
It works.
Yeah, it does, and it works. It's just interesting.
Okay, I think we're all back. It is now 10:35. We will go back into our meeting, and we will go back to our agenda. We have got through item 7, and we are now to item 8 on the agenda, which is the WCS report. And Mr. Carlson.
11:35.
Oh, excuse me, 11:35. Sorry, on Texas time.
There you go.
Thank you.
Dave.
Let me start by talking about surcharges. And of course, surcharges are basically a gross receipts tax paid on gross revenue that's received for activities. The surcharges for out-of-compact waste went back up to 31.25% from 16.25% on September the 1st for all non-compact waste that comes into the facility. So that's increased back to where it was previously at 15%. We had 2 years where that was reduced. So what are our surcharges for the last quarter? The TCQ received $754,000. Andrews County received $266,000. If I roll up all the way back to 2012 to the present, it's about $54 million to TCEQ and $12 million to Andrews County, or a total of about $66 million in surcharges that have been paid over the last 7 years. In terms of disposal in 2019, and we go by the state fiscal year, so the state fiscal year starts on September 1st, ends on August 31st. In 2019, we disposed of 23,843 cubic feet of waste with about 200,000 curies. So that makes our total from 2012 to the present about 150,000 cubic feet of waste out of 9 million cubic feet of license capacity. So at the current rate, we've used less than 2% of our capacity in the past 7 years. So at the current rate, we have about 400 to 500 years of capacity left in the facility. And those are the figures I'd like to present. Do you have any questions?
Is that, are you getting more waste?
Is activity picking up?
Yeah, is the activity speeding up?
Yeah, during the period when the surcharges were reduced, we had a statistically significant increase in the waste that we received. We calculated a bit over 40%. We'll have to see how that goes now that the surcharges have been restored to a much higher level.
And cyclically, is this last quarter of the fiscal year, does it tend to be the slowest and things pick up now once the new fiscal year starts, or is there any statistical significance in the changeover?
Yes, what we really see is June, July, August, sometimes September are very busy months. The rest of the year can be slower. It's very much keyed into outages at nuclear power plants. And also the fact that we have northern states that don't tend to ship in the wintertime.
How does this compare with previous years with shipments and with revenues and stuff? I mean, are things looking up or Are they pretty level, or?
We had a couple of fairly good years when we were going through Humboldt Bay decommissioning and the Sprue decommissioning. It never turned a profit in those years, but certainly the losses were smaller during those periods. This current year, we're starting up a decommissioning activity. It's an in-compact decommissioning activity, so of course the prices for disposal are quite low. That's helpful, but I think we've been flat-ish for a few years.
Any other questions for Mr. Carlson?
Good job. Appreciate y'all being here.
Thank you very much. That concludes item 8 on our agenda. We're now going to move on to item 9, which is a report from our Rules Committee about the status of our small quantity generator capacity reservation rule, which, Commissioners, is tab 18 in your notebooks and in your PDFs. And I will turn it over to Commissioner Morris.
Thank you. Just to remind everyone, this rule actually went into effect September 23rd, so it is in effect at present. And essentially what it did, we amended a definition for small quantity generator. In case you're interested, we had a petition this morning approved for a small quantity as a small quantity generator set aside. Use that 200 cubic feet, no more than 100 curies of waste a year. Does not include nuclear power generation facilities, electric utilities, or the U.S. Department of Defense. So that's kind of what the definition of a small quantity generator. And essentially what it did was reserve 2,000 curies per fiscal year for disposal of non-party compact waste. And that figure could change based upon majority vote of the commission. So essentially that's the last report that we'll be having on this new rule.
I want to thank the Rules Committee and especially Commissioner Morris for all the hard work they did on this. It was brought to our attention that it had been our policy for a long time, but it had never been codified, and so we thought putting into rule was appropriate for posterity, if nothing else, and also to give everybody peace of mind that was going to be there. So we appreciate all the efforts in that regard. That concludes item 9. We will now go into item 10, which is a chairman's report. And let me say this, it is now 11:40, and I know that no one likes to hear me speak, and they especially don't like to hear me speak when it's getting close to the lunch hour. So what we're going to do is I'll give a very brief report. The next item on our agenda is actually something we will probably go into executive session about, which relates to personnel matters. So after I am done with this and we go into the executive session, there's really nothing substantive left in the meeting. So I guess what I'm saying is feel free to go eat lunch. But with that being said, we passed our budget last meeting. We had line items in that budget that I think are already proving out to be more generous than we needed them to be, in particular because we have not hired staff yet. Some of our staff costs for the year will go down, thankfully. We have entered an hourly agreement with Andrew Tchaikovsky, who has sent us his first bill, and we had $30,000 allocated for that specific line item. I think that's going to be sufficient. And Andrew has been very gracious in helping us with some of our administrative and day-to-day tasks that he has a very intense knowledge of. We have also put out for bid a new request for proposal for an auditor. We had used an auditor for several years, and on the advice of our outside accountant, she said periodically you change your auditors, and so we will be seeking a new auditor. We now that the dust of this session and some of our other housekeeping matters is hopefully coming to an end, we will once again start to focus in the next several months on our contingency plan. As you recall, before last session, there was an interim committee that met and discussed that contingency plan. We have a draft of a shell of a contingency plan that now is going to need to be finalized and filled out a little bit more by some of our partners at the state of Texas and others. So it is something that we still take very seriously and we want to get completed. So we will be pushing our attention back to the contingency plan in the coming days. Again, we may be calling on some or all of you in this room to provide input and maybe some ideas. The last item on the chairman's report really relates to item 11, which is, I will say, for the public meeting, we have not offered anyone either position that we have identified we'd like to hire, which is the executive director and an administrative assistant. As I said, Andrew is working on an hourly basis to assist us in some of those matters. We are working through the personnel issues as diligently as we can. As is often the case, things just take longer than we expect. We have a lot of qualified candidates, which we feel very lucky to have, but it's now just a matter of working through them all and working through some of our stakeholders to get to a conclusion. But we hope to be doing that sometime in the not too distant future. Again, with the plan being that we hire the administrative assistant first and then hire the executive director, just simply because the immediate needs probably is for an administrative assistant to keep the wheels on to what we do. So with that being said, that concludes the chairman's report, and we'll move on to item 11, which is a discussion and possible action related to personnel matters, including the hiring of the admin assistant and the executive director. Again, I'll introduce this agenda item, but because of the discussion that we're going to need to have, we will go into an executive session on this topic now on item 11. So let me read that the time is now 11:45 a.m. local Vermont time, and the commission will go into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code section 551.074 to discuss personnel matters related to agenda item 11. The commission will reconvene in open session at the end of the closed session. I don't know that it will take very long, but as I said, there's really nothing left on the agenda after this, so I would not want you to all stick around and wait for us to come back and say adjourned. Yes, Eddie? Briefly, right now, the only meeting we have scheduled for the remainder of the year is November 22nd, and it will happen in Austin because we have pending applications. Past that, it's probably prudent to wait to schedule any further meetings into the new year. They'll have one likely in January, but we probably need to get through our November meeting before we schedule those. Yes, it definitely will be held because we have applications that I know can't be
There's
deferred.
at least 3, I just looked.
So that's the advanced discussion on item 12. But with that, we will now go into executive session. Commissioners, I think we're going across the hall to room 10. And for those of you that are leaving, thank you very much for attending. I want to once again express our complete gratitude for the state of Vermont and for Commissioner Sadek and his wife. This is always the best trip of the year, and we always enjoy it. So we appreciate just the room and everything else that's been provided to us. So thank you all.
I want to say that we appreciate your coming up. I mean, God knows, we know what a hassle it is to do that, the logistics, work them out. So very happy that you come on up.
So thank you all for coming. For those of you who are leaving, safe travels home if you're headed that way.
And if you have a little time, probably the peak foliage is about halfway down the state from here. It's still a little past peak now here. And I had guaranteed it would be peak today, but unfortunately, I think I bet wrong. It's more down your way, right?
It is peak on the way up here. It is about halfway between here and Emerson, Vermont, because I was on the way up and I saw.
You go to Queechee.
I saw quite a beautiful scene. It was the mountain, everything was colored, and then there was a little valley that was just filled with things. It was beautiful, and I wish I had a camera out so I could missed that. I just got to keep it here. Beautiful.
Are we back on? The time is now 12:16 a.m. Local Vermont time. The commission is back on the record for agenda item 11. The commission took no action in closed session. I'll now open the floor to my colleagues for any motions or discussion on item 11.
Based on our discussions, I make a motion that we grant the chairman authority to make the hiring decision, the ultimate hiring decision with regard to our administrative assistant.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. All in favor indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Please show the chair voting, and with the chair's vote, the motion passes. The only last item on our agenda is agenda item 12, which is our future dates. Currently, our future, the only solidified future meeting is November 22nd, 2019 in Austin. We have proposed a meeting in January for January 16th, but that is tentative, and so obviously things can happen in the interim that might cancel that meeting, but right now that is also scheduled for Austin, Texas. Any questions about future meeting dates?
The only, not a question, but we will need to probably pretty quickly when we get back is figure out who we contact at the Capitol to get a room reserved
Yes.
and all that.
Yes, Linda brought that up earlier, and that's a very good point. Any other questions about future meetings? With that, then, we are through with our agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all very much for attending. Thank anyone who's left on the phone.
You have down